Greetings, this is Pastor Mock, and this is the third episode in our gossip series. We are looking at the essence of the book Resisting Gossip, not going through it page by page or anything like that, but just hitting the highlights of most of the chapters. And we're using his definition of gossip, which is bearing bad news behind someone's back from a bad heart. And now in this third episode, we are considering the question, why do we gossip? There are many motives that we looked at last time and that we'll continue to look at next time. Motives of jealousy, anger, hatred, boredom, pride, fear of man. But one other way we can answer the question, why do we gossip, is by recognizing that everyone loves a story. And remember, gossip is about communicating stories. It's telling stories about someone behind that person's back. And we all love stories, whether these stories are good stories or bad stories, if they are literarily pleasing or not. We do enjoy stories. And if I started telling you about there once was a chicken and his name was Greg, you might have some questions about this chicken named Greg. And you might find out that his wife laid an egg, and you might have some additional questions about Greg and his wife, the chickens, and why she only was able to lay one egg, and on and on. Well, she went to the store, she had to get some more. Okay, so here's a brief story that I tell my children, or rather sing when they are young, as I brush their teeth. It's not an enthralling story at all, and it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. But as soon as someone says a story, as soon as someone talks about something that happened to them, we're all ears. We love stories. And I'm sure you found this out to be the case, that, again, the story doesn't have to be a good one for you to watch the whole thing or listen to it or read it. You might watch an episode of some show and you realize that you just wasted an hour or 30 minutes for a story that wasn't worth your attention. Nevertheless, you watched it all because you enjoy listening to the story and the development of the characters and the plot and what happens. Even though it might be a bad story and the acting cheesy, you gotta know what happens at the end. Well, the Bible is full of stories, a lot of individual stories that support the one main story about God and his glory, and that glorious and gracious God who extends his loving compassion, lavishes his love upon an undeserving people. Well, the story doesn't begin in Genesis 3. Of course, the story begins in Genesis 1 with the creation of man. But the story goes wrong in Genesis 3. And that's, of course, that story of Satan, who tempts Eve, who contradicts the word of God, the story of God, the way that God has structured the world and his plan for Adam and Eve, and what they are to do by exercising dominion over all the earth and glorifying him and enjoying him forever. You have Satan as the serpent, who comes and slanders the reputation, the honor, the glory of God. We're thankful that the story doesn't end with that wrong story that Satan tells, but the story continues in Genesis 3:15, where there's that promise of victory over the serpent, victory over sin, over death, by the seed of the woman who would crush the head of the serpent. And gossip is a retelling or an evil echo of the wrong story. Gossip is playing God with our own words. Gossip is loving the wrong stories, or it's being in league with the one who has told a wrong, contradictory story about God, about us, about the world. Gossip is destroying others with our words by retelling the wicked story of the serpent, by contradicting God, by dishonoring God's honor. And we have to remember that in Matthew 12:34, gossip is a heart issue. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. We can't just stop saying words and expect our gossip problem to be addressed adequately. Just like you can't, if a man is struggling with lust of the eyes, if he simply removes his eyeballs, that does not solve his problem. It might offer him fewer opportunities to look upon someone and to consider that beauty in a lustful way. But of course, he still has his mind, he still has his imaginations, he still has his heart that is not material. So gossip, though expressed with words, is a heart issue. And our words are not morally neutral. Our words are going to find their allegiance in either God and his truth and what God commands of us, how God expects us to speak about him and about others and to others, or our words are going to find their allegiance with self and our own self-promotion or our own sinful motives. And so before we get into next episode on the gallery of gossips, 5 kinds of gossipy people, let me just ask you, what kinds of stories do you like? Ask yourself about the kind of stories that you are attracted to and why. Are you more attracted to the kind of story that speaks about a young man who spends his day reading the Bible, teaching the Bible, writing notes to church members, singing songs to his Lord, and serving the poor, reaching out to the homeless? Is that the kind of story that attracts you? Or maybe the story about the young man who's been married for a couple of years and cheats on his wife and has found someone else that he wants to love for the rest of his life and abandons the child that he and his first wife had. What story of those two is more attracted to you? Is more attractive to you? Is it the one that seems to be not worthy of note, or is the one that's got the sin involved? Why do you like one story over another? Do you like good stories, bad stories? And even those words are subjective. What for you makes a good story or a bad story? Are you attracted to shameful stories? And if so, why? Are you attracted to redemptive stories? What kinds of stories are you attracted to, and why? Try to dig deep into what appeals to you about the stories that you watch or the stories that you listen to. Maybe you overhear certain conversations at church or the office, And some conversations you overhear and you're like, yeah, doesn't matter to me, and you just keep on walking. But other stories pique your interest, and you pause. Should I walk over there and insert myself in this conversation because it's of interest? Well, what is it? What is it about that story that interests you more than the one that is of note, and you just walk on by? So these are some questions to ask to begin to get at the heart of gossip. We'll see you next time in considering 5 kinds of gossipy